Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
There is no doubt that America is split into two different warring factions, the red and the blue. We can say that, and we can say the black versus the white. We can say that basically America's divided, and I don't believe it's just America. I do believe this is a universal issue that is going on. Nancy and I travel the country, going from park to home, communicating with people, and we talk about this. And we're very excited because we got an awesome press release from an awesome company who said, hey, you got to watch this documentary. It's called The-Reunited-States. It's something that addresses what Nancy and I have been experiencing on the road. And we've experienced a whole bunch. Let me just say, when you're on the road a lot, you do. But this documentary follows 4 everyday heroes on a difficult journey of bridging our political divides. We have to at some point. I mean, do we want it to go further? Look at what happened this January with the storming of the Capitol building. How far do we have to go? What about communication? Nancy and I have said it, from table to table with people, breaking bread, literally having conversations that no matter, you're not supposed to talk about religion and sex drugs, or alcohol, whatever. We want to talk about it.
Said. That's what my grandma said. Never talk about sex, politics, or religion, and those are the 3 things that always come up.
And you must talk about them. And people say, I don't want to say this. I know we're not supposed to, but when you travel, you see this happening, and it can come from both sides. But there's the middle, the independent side. So anyway. The-Reunited-States is coming out. It's out now in virtual cinemas. Will be out on VOD, virtual on demand everywhere through all the different platforms like Amazon and iTunes on February 9th. And it is really cool. It's based on the book by the same name by Author-Mark-Gerzon, who is an awesome human being. This gives us hope and some ways to just connect personally. We're very excited because we have the award-winning narrative and documentary filmmaker Ben-rekhi join us on Big Blend Radio today to talk about his film. And I encourage you to go to the website. It's The-Reunited-States.TV. That way you can connect in as it goes out and all the different streaming devices. We're all streaming stuff these days with this pandemic. And also they have a cool premiere coming up on February 11th, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Ben, thank you so much for making this film, and welcome. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me, Lisa and Nancy. Yeah, I'm excited to talk more about it. There's endless conversations going on about our political divide, and so hopefully this is can be a small part of that moving forward.
Yeah, I really, Nancy and I both appreciate your film, as we were saying in the beginning. I don't mean to take a big, long intro that often, but it's something that really hits home for us as we travel and we talk to people. Just the couple that was in your video, David Leverton and his wife Erin going across in an RV, and he's a Republican, he's a staffer, and said, "Hey, let's go check out what's going on in the country. Why do we have this divide?" And we really, they connected with us in so many ways because we do travel. And I thought that was huge. That was huge.
Yeah.
What they did.
Yeah. Their story, I mean, David and Erin Leverton, Republican family with 3 kids from Texas. And, in a nutshell, David used to work as a campaign operative, helping to win elections, and, had to foment a lot of division and animosity to do that. And when 2016 came around and he saw the violence breaking out around the election, he felt tremendously guilty that he had somehow played a role in this, in fomenting division. And his wife turned to him and said, look, if we didn't have a job and bills and, kids to feed, like, what would you really want to do with your life? And without thinking, he said, I'd want to bring unity back to this country. And it kind of stopped her in her tracks. And she said, what does that look like? Let's talk that out. And they came up with this idea to sell their house, buy an RV, and travel to all 50 states to find out what's causing these divisions. And it's this incredible story of this evangelical family going into Black communities and Native reservations and border towns and really acknowledging that our version of America is not the same as the version of America that everyone else lives in. And, you know, they went out with an open heart and said, tell us your story. We want to understand what your life experience has been. And people would just tell them the most deeply personal and heartbreaking, tragic experiences they've been through because of the color of their skin or their background or their culture or religion. And it would just break down these walls of division, and they would look within and say, we had no idea that we were part of this problem. And I think that really embodies the theme of the film, is that, you know, even if we think we're on the right side of an issue or the right side of the aisle, like, we're all either putting fuel on the fire or diffusing our divisions every day. And so we all have a role to play in polarization and in the healing. And we hope that's what this film helps amplify.
Yeah, and I really, there's so many stories with what they did and experienced, so many stories. We were in Shiprock a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And we drove through there, and this is sad. It's a sad story. Shiprock's sad. And then we ended up driving on this stupid, crazy road trip day. We're like, well, we'll just leave Florence, Colorado, Southwest Colorado, and when we get to Yuma, Arizona, right, border town, all kinds of interesting things there too. We're going to take our time and car camp on our way down, just so we can do all our parks that we do on our Love Your Parks tour. And we ended up driving and really needing to go to the bathroom. I remember needing to pee like you wouldn't believe. And we'd driven through the $1 million highway. It's like one of the deadliest roads of America. And I'm like, I'm done. And no, we're going to drive through Shiprock at night. And when we drove through there, it was like a Friday or Saturday night, and people were high or drunk or something.
Well, teenagers.
When you stopped at a stoplight, tried to push another teenager into the car. Almost like a death run. And I've heard this is like a new thing now. And then when we got on the highway, you know, here's some, you know, those amazing buttes, you know, that you see in your film, where, you know, Aaron and David were. When we drove off, you know, I was following a truck. They ran in the highway and did that. And I think I was just like, what the heck, man? I was freaked out, you know, and I really did almost pee in my pants. I didn't. I held it together.
Yeah.
Man.
You know,
but anyway, you know what I mean? There's issues there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that brings up a really good point. Like, you know, the Levertons in the film, when they go to Shiprock, they see how broken the community is, and like you said, alcohol is just rampant. And I think it's easy to sort of say, oh, like, look at this, the reservation, people, you know, are dealing with alcoholism, and it's like, you know, impoverished. But if you put in the context that this is a community that's been just totally decimated over several centuries and beaten, demeaned, you know, families ripped apart, forced into schools, killed and raped, and then you think, okay, well, of course there's a reason that there's a history behind this. And so I think that looking at it, the historical context is really important. And in the story, that's one of my most favorite scenes, because you really hear from people on the reservation telling their story and trying to contextualize it for folks, which is not a voice we hear often enough.
And, you know, there's so many that don't want to hear it at all. They just don't.
Yeah. I guess you bring up a really good point, because there's, you know, there's people that, you know, okay, there's outward racists that are like, we don't, you know, agree with this, or we don't like these people. But then there's a lot of us and a lot of people on the journey that haven't had the life experience to interact with people of color, and may not be on the same leg of the journey. And so there's a common statement that's like, oh, well, that was, you know, my ancestors, like, I didn't have anything to do with that, you know. But the problem is there's still systems in place and policies in place that, like, you know, still carry these systemic problems forward. And so I try and be a little bit more forgiving and understanding that people are on different legs of that journey. I mean, I myself in my teenage or early 20s was saying things that I think were a lot more, you know, less evolved than I am now. And so I can't fault other people for not having the opportunity to interact with people that can help give context and open their eyes. And we really hope to make with the film a more delicate way to talk about these issues, because I think there is a lot of like shame and anger and canceling going on that's actually making people run in the other direction. And I think if we approach this from compassion and say, hey, like, here are some stories to think about, maybe we can change some hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
I think that's it, Nancy. And as we travel, we find that you sit down with someone, and you're really connecting. You're loving this person, and then you find out the other political side, and you're like, oh, now what? But we really like this person. We share these common visions of different things, love, family, and I think that's so important that we rediscover them. They always say, like, also with a couple, right, a married couple, and that their love gets, a little lost, the honeymoon's over, and then you have to rediscover why you got married or hooked up in the first place. What was that spark? What was that joy? And I think that's what our country has to do, and the world. I think your movie plays to the rest of the world. England's going through it. All these countries are going through these divides. This is a global thing. But I love the reunited states. It's like, I love Kamal Bell. But anyway, it's the same kind of like, hello, this is why this happened. This is the history. And what can we do to unite and remember why we're friends? Because people it's like the Civil War, and you talked about that in the film, not you personally, but I think it was Author-Mark-Gerzon. Amazing. I downloaded his ebook today. Got his ebook. I'm like, dude, this is my new thing. Because what can we do to unite? And like you have the Millennial Action Project, Stephen Olikara on there. My gosh, this Millennial Action Project, not only is it about young people coming together, but a lot of people hate young people. They think everybody is a millennial stupid. There's like that. All these different issues are coming together, but we can find this together. We got to remember the joy. Remember the joy of these children, what they were. You know what I mean?
It's all based on insecurity. No matter how, like I remember growing up in the 60s, and okay, you're a hippie chick, you're this, you're that, and then later on, the hippies were in, then they're out, and now they were like dirty hippies. We didn't take baths apparently. I don't remember not taking a bath, but whatever, seriously. And so now we have a new generation to pick on. That's all it is. And I'm like, why do we do that? What is up with that?
Well, you mentioned Mark-Gerzon. I mean, he was transformative in this journey and the inspiration for the whole thing. He wrote the book, The-Reunited-States, How We Can Bridge the Partisan Divide. And he's been doing this for 30 years, like this kind of bridging work. And he saw this crisis coming like way before most of us. I mean, we started this film 3 years ago, and it's only become more relevant. I can't imagine his journey. And one of the things that he always says is, at the end of the Cold War, when you had Reagan shake hands with Gorbachev, it was this moment of celebration where we're like, we don't have this, superpower enemy anymore. But the problem is it turned our energy inwards, and we turned our enemies inwards. And ever since then, if you look at how this tracks, like at the end of the 80s, early 90s was the beginning of the internal polarization in this country. And so there's a really interesting argument to be made that having that common outside enemy is something that united us, and not having that is something that we've, turned inwards. And so there's, it feels like we're in our own Cold War now, where this could be a long struggle that we're facing. And I think that the past couple of weeks have shown the depth of the division, and that people are willing to resort to violence. And, not very many people. I mean, this is small numbers, but it's still, there's tens of millions of people that voted differently than each other. Yeah. And so
it's creepy right now. People are very fearful. And your movie, your documentary, Reunited States, everybody, again, go to Reunited-States.tv. I'm just going to keep pushing that. Everyone goes and watches this. You bring hope, and hope goes a long way. But it's not just hope. It's not like airy-fairy, like, woo, we could all be kumbaya. And your Susan Bro on there talks about this. It's not about kumbaya. This is about actual action. And I think it starts with ourselves as individuals, that we have to fix ourselves.
Well, self-interest.
That's
I think
right.
the people around the world will come together in only one way. When we're attacked, by aliens from outer space.
Oh,
Then countries
Wait,
around
what kind of
the
show am I
world.
on? I didn't realize that.
I know. Here she is. She's
I,
all like, no,
no,
gonna
Susan.
trip out. Trip out. But
I just want to mention Susan Bro. Like, she, obviously, she's been thrust into the public spotlight for her daughter, Heather Heyer, who was killed during the Unite the Right rally when the car drove through the crowd. And this whole film started actually because I saw a talk that Susan did when I was in D.C. And I was she was able to talk about, working through our divisions to avoid further violence. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was, like a lot of people, very emotional in 2016 and 2017 and trying to navigate this new reality. And here was someone who was on the front lines of division, who'd suffered the most unimaginable tragedy one could endure of losing a child to hate. And she was on the other side of that, talking about the need to come together and work through this, or, it's going to happen again. And I was just so moved because I was being petty about my emotions about politics. And so I went up to her and I said, I don't know how or why, but I want to be a part of telling your story because I feel like you're a voice of reason and there's a vacuum of them right now. And she kind of looked me up and down and said, here's my number. And I found out later that she did a lot of background checks on me for good reason. Cool. I mean, she has upset a lot of people on the left and on the right. I mean, for a lot of people on the left, they, aren't happy that as a white woman, she's taken up a lot of the oxygen about the race conversation. And on the right, there's a lot of people that have death threats against her who think she's a crisis actress who faked this whole thing. And so she does need to be careful. And so ultimately I poured my heart out to her and I said, I want to tell this story. It's the Reunited States. It's, it's going to be something that can help people and give people hope and show stories of, us or people trying to bridge the divide. And ultimately she agreed, and she allowed us to be in her car on the first anniversary of Charlottesville. And so we have this deep dive look at her story and what she was going through, and ultimately taking a bill to Congress on hate crime reporting and turning this horrible thing. And if you think about the events in Charlottesville, I mean, it changed her life and she got this bill passed. It is what inspired me to make this film, was seeing how far things have gone. And it's what inspired Biden to run for president. And so I think it's important to look that through great adversity comes a tremendous hope and possibility. And so not to say we want, these terrible things to happen, but it's really up to us of what we do with them.
Exactly. I think that's the balance. It the bad balance versus the good. Like if something really bad happens, then something good's it's just around the corner. It's the balance that
it's
nature
always
provides.
That extra step, even just in our personal, professional lives, we always feel like that one time that's like, okay, I'm done. Like, dude, I've tried so hard. I'm done. And you want to quit right there. But if you take that one extra step, I swear to God, it's the next day that door opens or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like that extra, But this is really remarkable what you've done. How did you get together with Mark, the author? I mean, is this something you're like, okay, I'm going to do this with Susan, and then how did all of this connect with you and everybody? Because even following them on the RV, David and Aaron on the RV.
Right. Yeah, no, it all happened around the same time. Meeting Mark and meeting Susan, I had done this series for PBS called The Hidden Vote that profiled minorities who support Trump. So it was like LGBT for Trump and Muslims for Trump. And it was a really insightful experience of how can we use media to hear each other better and understand each other better. And, it sort of led me on this journey that, storytelling has a really important role to play in bringing us back together. And so I came up with this title, The Reunited States, just randomly one day, and I was like, oh, this is a great title. It's probably too good. Somebody already has it. And so I Googled it, and there was a book of the same name, but on the same topic. And so I picked up the phone and I called Mark and I said, can we meet? And I went to meet him and, told him this whole idea. And he's like, I've actually been waiting for a filmmaker to approach me because I think there's this inconvenient truth style film about this topic that can really take this out into the world. And he was like, may I ask how you found me? And I told him the story of the title, and he kind of looked at me and scratched his beard and said, I guess it's meant to be. Let's set off on this journey. And so we through him, I'd already started following Susan, but he brought me the other 3 storylines because his book, which is fantastic and it's available for, the publishers are making a free download as part of this film. You can see it on our website, is profiles 40 or 50 people on the journey of bridging our divide. And I said, why don't we take that format and bring it to life in a film? Who are the 3 or 4 stories right now that are on their feet, traveling the country, trying to do this? I don't want this to be an academic film. I want it to be a visceral, emotional film. And so I would say, I want to follow someone on election night. He said, you should follow an independent because that's trying to break the 2-party system. And so he introduced me to Greg Orman. I said, I want to follow like a youth story. What can young people do? And he's like, you got to talk to Stephen Olakara. Like, he's building this coalition across the aisle that's going to transform government as we know it. And then the RV couple, I wasn't looking for them. He just called me one day and was like, you really have to talk to this story. And in all my 30 years of doing this work, I've never heard of anything more extraordinary of people actually going out into the world and trying to bridge divides. And as soon as I talked to David and Aaron, I was hooked. I was like, they have this self-awareness and they're able to talk about these really complicated issues, in their Southern drawl and kind of have this self-awareness that I was like, wow, this can really move people if we capture this. And so I met them on the journey, and, the rest is what you see in the film.
They're really honest, they're really honest about it. I mean, he did so much as a Republican, and I think that was so important because a lot of times documentaries of making changes, we're polarized. And yours is about unity. Right. And I think that is so crucial that you showcase that. And that's what I also loved. Independent, Greg Orman, what he's doing as an independent, like I'm registered as an independent because I will say that straight up because it's I would watch my language. The whole thing about being a party, it's like, no, I like this part of this Republican thing, and I don't even like how our bills are written because it's all the campaign contributions and funding from this. It makes no sense to an individual. And I think there should be single issue bills. Not, single we're writing this bill, and then we're going to put that in there too, and they're opposites, and then you're voting for something over here, and then you really don't want the rest of the bill. How
it becomes partisan?
Yeah. I'm not a working mom, but I'm on the road, and I know like my time is short. How do working moms doing 2 to 3 jobs come home and be able to look up everything that's going on in the country and be able to do a really good vote? You know what I mean? And right now, it's the world, especially when people are losing their jobs because of COVID and all of these things that are happening economically, they're going to do, number one, survival. And part of our survival is how our country moves forward. And yet at the political process has become this thing where I have friends and clients that they're consumed by that and not even doing their business professional life, and I respect that. But it shouldn't be that we have to all become glued to TV and every news alert to vote in this country. And I think it's because of this political divide that we have that we're not voting.
Yes.
We're hurting people by this.
Well,
this
and Lisa,
terrible.
You mentioned, you mentioned like being an independent. You're not alone. The data shows that actually 1/3 of Americans identify as independent, and here we are thinking it's only red and blue, and so it's actually there's more independents than there are like any other category, and the challenge is our 2-party system isn't really set up for a third force in our politics, and 160 years ago there were 5 political parties, but somehow it's been whittled down to these 2. And you think about the House of Representatives or Senate, and you say, oh, the Democrats are in charge or the Republicans are in charge. The parties were never meant to dominate these institutions.
Exactly.
They've sort of become like a virus that's infected them, and now we associate, it's the House Democrats, where that's not they're not supposed to be aligned in our thinking like that. And so Greg Orman, who's sort of one of the leaders of the independent movement, he ran for Senate in 2014 with this idea of the Senate fulcrum strategy. You know, if you have 100 senators in the House and 2 of them are independent, those 2 would have I don't mean far left independent like Bernie, I mean like moderate independent.
Yeah,
then those 2 would decide who controls the Senate on any policy, who confirms, you know, administration posts. And so he ran for Senate, and he was winning, and he was going to prove this theory to be true. And then at the time, the GOP launched this unprecedented rescue operation. They flew in all these national leaders and kind of, you know, ended up winning. But he ran for governor of Kansas, and I tell you, in 20 minutes on the phone with him, he turned my whole thinking around about independence being a spoiler, because I think it's so easy to say, oh, that'll never happen or they'll never win. It's unfortunately been set up by the 2 parties to make it really difficult for anyone else to enter in. But, you know, as much as this film is about changing our system of government, I would try and say it's more about the everyday people. Like, what can we do? I think it feels hopeless to look at, you know, our government and say they're gridlocked. And, you know, I mean, each party is incentivized to win elections, not to serve the people. They're there to win the next election. And so I think both sides are guilty of some of these, you know, tricks that we complain about. And so for us, it's like, how can we take agency over our own lives? Like, this political division has affected all of us. Like, we've all have family members that we can't talk to. We all have friends we've fallen out with. We've blocked people on social media. Those are the actions that we have control over. And what we really hope this film is saying, what can you do in your life where you are starting tomorrow? And that's a different way to frame this that gives so much agency and say, like, wait, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. And if we all do that, if enough of us do that, that's how we get out of this hole. It's not going to be our elected leaders that lead us forward. It's going to be us.
You know, that's what I love. It's action-based. You are action-based. With this movie, it showed action and how people can start to take action, right? Number one, you can start getting this, downloading the video, watching it as it comes out, February 9th, everyone. But it's action-based. It's not like the kumbaya, right? And going back to also that you in the movie, and it like that was like a light bulb moment for me. And, you know, it's like, oh, yeah. Well, one thing is when, you know, the Constitution was written, women weren't allowed to be part of the Constitution, by the way. It was all men. But it was not about political parties. There was no Republican. And I can't remember who said it in the movie, but in the documentary.
Greg.
But I was like, oh, yeah. Hell yes. They weren't about the 2 parties. Hello, everybody that is all freaked out about it. Dude.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the opening quote of the film says, the greatest good we can do our country is to heal our party divisions and make them one people. And it's from Thomas Jefferson. I mean, these issues that we're facing about partisanship have been here for hundreds of years. And
that's crazy.
So there's something about the
Thomas Jefferson. While people are pissed at him, he said this.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there's, you know, the difference between community and tribalism. Like, community is a group of people bound by love, and a tribe is a group of people bound together by hate. And I think that what's really happened is that our politics has metastasized into tribalism, and it's, you know, it's survival, and they realize that the most inflammatory, you know, positions get the most amount of coverage and the most news, and same with, you know, the media. It's really designed for advertising sales and for keeping you engaged. And so they're overemphasizing the most extreme 10% of the news because it keeps you clicking. Maybe the other 90% of reality doesn't look like that.
Are you talking about
and
Fox
so,
News?
No, I'm talking about CNN also. I'm talking about both sides. They're both incentivized to replay the same clip over and over, exaggerate the same news bite over and over. And so, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is these forces that, if you look at like our government, that's maybe made up of 1,000 people, elected officials nationwide. There's 330 million of us. And so to say that we're as divided as our government is just not true, because their incentives are different than ours. There's special interests involved. There's elections involved. And same with the news media. Like, we're constantly inundated with this. And so I think it's important to look around and say, is there good news out there? Are there stories of people doing this? And can I too?
You know, I have to say, we lived in Mexico, we lived in Kenya, we lived in England, we lived in South Africa, and so comparing the different systems, all the countries that we lived in.
And when you say tribe, that cracks me up.
Yeah, when
like,
you say tribe,
I went around
I
asking people
bristle
like
at the back of my neck right there. The word
tribe.
tribe. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, because we've been asked so many times, what tribe are you? It's really funny. But
no, we ask people.
No, it's interesting. But when I look at the different systems of all the countries we've lived in and done business in, which is not that easy, but somehow we managed, I have to say, when we think as Americans that we are all that much bigger and better, my feeling since we returned to this country is we used to be, but we're at a point now we got to take a strong look at who we elect, what we're doing, and I think we've been so comfy that we just, I vote this, I joined this party, so I vote party lines, without doing our homework. And dangerous place to be. Do your homework before you vote, because you could end up like other countries that have real problems. I mean, really big problems. So, where your kids can be taken off to war without your okay. We've seen stuff like that. So, we're too comfy. This is a big wake-up call. That's how I'm feeling.
Well,
and I'm not I don't react emotionally or violently or, oh, dude, now this is happening, and no, I'm not like that. But I'm looking at America and saying, wake up call.
Look, I mean, in the first 3 weeks of this year, we've had an insurrection, an impeachment, and an inauguration. Like, we are going through extraordinary shifts as a country. I don't think anyone would deny that this is something that we are still processing and we'll look back on. I think, just to touch on what we said earlier, there's also a huge opportunity here. Like, we are all going through this personal moment of identity and anxiety. Who are we as a country? Who am I as a person? Yeah. And I think that, like, the biggest thing that we can do is to understand that we all have a role in this, and that, we think, there was one statement that we were making this film that I learned to separate from myself, which is, if you voted for someone like Trump, then you must be a racist. And, if you actually look at the definition of that, there's a form of prejudice in there that says all 74 million of you are this type of person, which is ironic because that's what we're trying to fight is prejudice. And so, there's a lot of reasons why we got where we are, and obviously economic reasons, and, the disappearance of the middle class, and, automation and identity, like feeling purpose and dignity in manual labor, like that's gone. And so how do we bolster, like, people so that they feel included in this future together? I think that what we saw and what we're still experiencing is a backlash to people who feel like this country doesn't work for them anymore. And granted, there's a lot of countries never worked for, people of color, especially. Sure. And so I think now there's a realization that if we're going to find a shared future, we have to find where our common pain is. And the pain really comes down to this disenfranchisement. Like, is there a role for me in this world, in this country? And so I try and still listen with a little bit more of a sympathetic heart and understand that, a lot of people that supported Trump was because he felt like there was an opportunity or that he was fighting for them. And granted, the sound bites that are shown on the left are the worst ones from his speech. The ones that are shown on the right are the sensible ones from his speech. And unless you're watching both sides, it's hard to imagine why someone would vote for him. But for me, I've actually seen some of the good things that he's done. I've seen a lot of the bad things that I don't agree with. But, like, I understand why people felt that this was their only chance or that this was their saving moment. And so I think until we can start to humanize each other on both sides, like, if we just say those people are hopeless or, there's no saving them, then we're doomed. And that's something that we all have to own. For me, it's like, how do we see and hear each other better? And, I mean, just the fact that Van Jones and Megan-McCain have come on board the film and see what we see and saying, like, this is a message that's worth getting behind. And Van has been a bridge builder for a long time. He used to work in the Obama administration, but he's since made so many inroads into conservative communities, and he's got a whole group of people with MAGA hats that listen to him and look up to him, and Megan as well. The fact that her father was the maverick who was willing to work with the other side, and that's in her bones. And you know, even though it's hard going on the news every day and talking about these things, the fact that they joined forces and put aside their differences to say, if we can do it, then you can do it, is just so meaningful to this film.
I love that they were both part of, you know, the executive producers of this, because I think they really have made inroads, like you're saying, and I think that is a huge deal, and it's something that, yes, we can swap sides. I know Trump supporters, I know, you know, Biden supporters, both sides of the party, and I'm going to say, just from our travels, like we were talking about in the show, we're all connected. We are all connected. It's about, like, hey, man, I care about this park because we're park people, because that's our thing, and hey, our parks are getting some good justice right now. Yay. But you know, it's really about coming together over what can you find in commonality, what can we do to help each other. And that's the beauty of your film. I just want to say, I know we got to go, but I really, really, really appreciate that, because it is about coming together, and it's also about taking action and what we can do. And it is just reaching over with a hand sometimes. And maybe right now we can't because of COVID. And I think COVID has really done a lot of that too, because people can hide on the internet and be, you know, silly. But we
and we're
can
just isolated from each other.
Yeah.
But we can do things. There are things we can do, and we can find them. We could change what we do on social media for a start. And how about that?
Yeah.
Why don't we just start? I've started a kindness project on our Facebook community, because I'm like, let's just do a thing. What can we do every day to talk about kindness for a month, just for a month? And I can't believe how, no, come on, people, get on board with that. Come on. I'm just saying.
Social media is not known for kindness.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm trying.
I would, but I echo you. Like, I think that there are dozens of decisions every day that all of us are making to either be uniting us or dividing us. And I think the biggest misconception is that by shaming people or yelling at people that you don't agree with. I mean, look, conservatives think that liberals are destroying the country, and conservatives are trying to save it. Liberals think the same thing. And so I think the biggest thing for me that was a shift was saying, wow, my thoughts, words, and actions are hurting people, or they actually matter. And if I'm saying something that is blanketing entire groups of people as a certain way, like all ex-supporters are this, that's unfair, and that's actually part of the problem, and I need to own that. And so the two things.
That's racist. Not racist, but what do you call it? What do you call it when you just
prejudice? Partisanship is the new prejudice. Like, it's, it's like you were talking about businesses earlier. Like, I'm not going to serve you if you voted for X or something. I'm not going to go to this business. It is the new prejudice.
When we lived in Africa, one of the things that drove me crazy was, what tribe are you? That's the first question everybody asked. What tribe are you?
A lot of it was to know how to address.
And so it was like, so they would know how to handle you. They would know.
And identify you and label you.
Sell you. Know how to sell you whatever they're trying to sell you. What tribe are you? And I was like, wow, this is so bizarre. What tribe are you? And it was only like, how many years later I went, well, what tribe are you? It took me so long.
It was when we got to England, and I was a little girl on the train when we landed in London and got on the train, and I went to the conductor who was a black man, and I went and asked him what tribe was he, and he was completely offended. And this was the best. That was the way. So I knew, do you look in his eyes? Do you not? How do I, communicate? Because some tribes in Africa, you do not look in their face directly. That is an insult. Or it is everybody's different.
It's the same metaphor here. Like, I think your point is well made. Is like, we need to know what bucket you go in, so we know what to think of you. And that's part of the problem. Is I need a label to put on you, so I know like how to position you in my mind. I will say, I know we're kind of coming close to the end here. The two tools that we have in addition to the film. One is we're launching this website. It'll be up shortly after this airs, The-Reunited-States.TV, that actually has things you can say and not say to family members and friends that you disagree with, and here's some words that you should use and avoid. And we did it in conjunction with the Braver Angels, who uses family counseling to help heal political divisions. And so that's a really great resource that we're hoping that can give people, and say things that, might be helpful. And then the second thing is we're launching this red and blue carpet premiere of the film. Which will be really exciting. It's going to be on February 11th. It's a live stream. We're opening it up to the public. Van Jones and Megan-McCain have agreed to be our keynote speakers there. It's not going to be a screening of the film. It'll be this conversation and spotlighting everyday heroes that are doing this work. And Van and Megan will be there. The cast will be there, and there's a few surprise guests, other sort of celebrities and musicians. But it's really you can register at reunitedstates.tv/premiere. So we'd love to open it up and invite all your listeners here to join us.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
Series?
Everyone, again, so we're going to go time-wise here. Reunitedstates.tv is the website to go to. So everyone check it out there. And again, that's going to be February 11th. And keep up with them. It's going to be out on all streaming platforms like iTunes and Amazon On Demand. Just go to reunitedstates.tv so you can connect anyway. But that will be on February 9th when it's available for everyone. Right now, as this airs, it is out on video on demand, right? So everyone's getting that from 29th of January on. So go get it. Go watch it. Thank you so much, Ben, for what you've done. And it's just such a pleasure and a pleasure chatting with you. And thank you for what you do as a filmmaker. It's important. And we're going to close.
So much, Lisa.
Thank you. And we're gonna close with the song Kwame Benet and the Shakedown. I've been on our shows for a gazillion years, and we love their music. And this is called Universal Love, an old Jimmy Cliff song that he covered on their album Roots Rock and Universal Love. So here it is, Universal Love. We got to close it up. So thanks so much, Ben. You take care.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Nancy. And hopefully you get there.
Take care, man.
See you on the road.
Beyond the family boundary, go beyond the tribal boundary, and beyond social boundary, yes, beyond national boundary. You give up the love. You young political